Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app. This series is brought to you by IDII Australia, committed to working with advisors to protect the financial health and welfare of more than 3 million Australians. In 2020, AIA paid over $2.2 billion in claims. That's a little over $42 million each week, and clients needed it most. AIA Australia would like to help you arm yourself for your next client appointment with this 5-part series into Australia's income protection industry from the 90s to now. Strengthen your knowledge and conversations with valuable insights from a panel of speakers from various backgrounds, exploring how the new generation of IP products can help your clients. Thank you for joining us again. This is episode 3 in our IDII series. In this particular episode, we're really diving into the concept of mindset and the critical thinking that needs to take place within the advisor's head so that they can approach conversations with their clients coming from a new or a different mindset. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes in the products themselves, and this episode is focusing on the changes that need to take place within our own minds before we have conversations with clients. Thank you for joining us again, Katherine Hayes.
Thank you.
Now, we are talking about the mindset that advisors need to take forward into this new world. Tell us about how you have conversations and your thinking and the way that you come to that critical thinking conversations with your clients.
Yeah, so at my stage of my practice, I probably spend more time working with brand new clients, those who've never had any insurances in the past before. So as far as this post 1 October world, those conversations are a little bit easier to have because they've never had prior covers. So what's on offer is simply what's there. So I think as much as it's been feeling like a bit of doom and gloom with the loss of all these benefits that we've become accustomed to having, I think it's important to have a mindset about your new clients who don't have any cover. They don't understand that, they don't know that, and if it's an option that's not available to them, there's no point lamenting over the past. So we just focus on finding a really good fit for what's there. But I do think as far as mindset goes and care, we have to be more careful than ever before, even if somebody has never had income protection in the past, because there's been a significant downside shift to the negative in terms of the offsets, the exclusions, and the adjustments that have to be made. So as long as that's happening in the background, I think it's kind of business as usual with a little bit of extra care. As far as existing clients, that's a different kettle of fish, having those conversations and going, okay, it's making them aware that they have something that they will never be able to get again, so it becomes valuable. As long as it remains affordable, they're happy with it. If it becomes unaffordable, then yes, that's when we've got to start having conversations around what are the options. And there are a numerous range of options to have, alterations to the existing policy versus switching or, adopting a wait and see approach even potentially.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that the loss of benefits or the loss of not having the old products. And I think a lot of advisors are still in the headspace of they're trying to get their head around being positive for a new client and saying this is what's available and this is what you can have when they know inside their own brains what was available previously, which is a little bit difficult. So going into those, premium shock has been very difficult, tricky conversations for advisors. How have you had those conversations with your clients?
I've been trying to prepare my clients for the last year or two, saying that, look, these policies were at the peak of the best definitions we're ever going to get. When they end, what I would expect to see premium increases. And I just said, look, insurers are losing money, but that's because they're paying claims, counter to what the media and, socials tell you. Insurers do pay claims. So I have been preparing them and saying, yes, we probably expect some pay rises, but that's because they need to be around to pay your claim should you need to claim. And if it does become a problem, let's have a conversation. So that's a conversation I've already prepared my clients for. So when they're seeing it, it's less of a shock. That being said, I still do get some nasty shocks. We've all seen some of the price increases that have come through. When you get even something as low in 20s, 30%, and it's happening every year, every second year, it's pretty nasty. We've all seen those 70% IP level premium shocks and 100%, 130%, I think, from one I even saw. That is really tough to stomach. And sometimes you see people, they lose their faith in insurance, and I think that's really, really damaged, but it'll come down to the individual and where they're at. And that's where we've got to pull out all those soft skills and help the clients see that their cover remains valuable, but there may come a point where it's not worth it for them. And we also have to acknowledge that as well.
Yep. Now that's those big increases have damaged a little bit of trust in the system, in the products, in the advice that was provided. Even the clients are feeling a little bit, but I think the advisors are feeling a little bit as well. A little loss of trust.
Yeah. So for me, I must say I'm probably a little bit more critical of insurers who have had the surprise has been there rather than when there's been some expectation given there. There was a couple of insurers where you could see aggressive pricing discounts, and experience has taught me, I said, oh, that looks like a great deal, but I know what that's going to mean a couple of years down the track. And even though that looks like the best option right now, I was sort of avoiding any significant outlier insurer because I just thought, no, that just means a big price hike down the track, and I've had enough of those. So taking that approach has helped a little bit, but finding an insurer who can be a little bit better in managing the costing of their books is something that I've grown to value more these days.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, when you overlay your experience of claims, your experience of premium shocks, your experience of the insurers that they're all keeping promises when it comes to paying claims, but the insurance, the ones that communicate to you a little bit better, all that experience overlays your decision-making process when it comes to how you choose a specific product.
Absolutely. And sometimes it can be as simple as the way a letter is worded to a client, or whether the insurer communicates with you as the advisor before they tell the client. So where you get experiences where they go to the client first and you're not aware of it, that's really unpleasant, and that leaves a bad taste.
Yep. Talk to me about the concept of getting your head around all the new products. This has been an interesting part. Obviously, know your product's a pretty big part of the legislation, always has been. But tell us about getting your head around the different products, and then to be able to then think about them from a where do you start point of view, like from where do you, because you can't just compare apples with apples anymore.
Oh, absolutely. I think you really do have to go old school and do a deep dive into the PDSs. So I've been working on a spreadsheet that I've been building for myself. I've analysed all the key insurers that I'm predominantly using over the last couple of years, and now I'm moving on to the ones I use for more outlier situations. And unfortunately, as part of that analysis, I've looked at one of the insurers I was previously using quite heavily and going, I don't think I could use you anymore. I don't see how you're going to fit in with my client base, which is a shame because everything else with the insurer works pretty well, but there was significant downside to the definitions put in place. So I think it's really important to have a look at that in a deep level. As far as rating software and relying on that, from what I understand, one of the rating softwares, it's the way it looks at superannuation contributions as an example. Some insurers are simply saying that your insurable income might be your wage without super, and then you either can or cannot insure super on top of that. Others are saying it's your total remuneration package, including super contributions, and super may or may not form part of the insurable amount. So when you take that into account with the income replacement ratios, you've got a huge variation of what really can be insured. But one of the insurance rating software, when it asks, can you insure superannuation, it says yes. So, but that doesn't give you any detail whether it's the SG rate, whether it's part of the overall package. Is it at the income replacement ratio rate? Is it 100% up to a certain level? There's really not a huge amount of detail in that side. But some of the digging that I've been doing is and putting my little strategy notes on it. And that's what I'm doing for each insurer. Here are the pros for certain situations, and here is where certain client scenarios that we come across where we're going to have to take significant care or just completely avoid this insurer, even if they are the best priced and product featured, because there may be some settings which would make them a detrimental fit for the client.
Yeah. And this also makes advice even more complex, doesn't it? Because trying to explain these different things to a client or allow them to understand how one product is different from another and why you're choosing one over another.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a perfect example would be sick leave. Some insurers are choosing to offset sick leave even if you don't take it. Others will allow you to have a certain amount in store before they offset it, and others will only offset it if you happen to be double dipping on the IP benefit payments. If you look at some of the insurers, they will have waiting periods that will not match someone's sick leave entitlements. So you could have somebody who has a 90-day wait, but if they've got, 6 months plus of leave entitlements, they're going to, for me, I look at that going, oh, that's a complaint waiting to happen if you recommended that insurer, because they're off work for 6 months and they get nothing. So that could be a real issue for the advisor. So care has to be taken in those scenarios. Similar things with parental leave. There's some issues around there. Whether you're able to ensure ongoing business income. There's so many elements to take into account.
Yeah, it's interesting those words, complaint waiting to happen. I guess there's two sides to this though, right? Because if you put a lot of detail into this at the beginning, explaining to the client, look, there are 10 different things here. These are the most important ones. These things are going to come down later. Once you've got something like that in place, it makes it very difficult for, I guess, the other products would have to change for them to come back into the realm.
That's right. And then you still have to put your overlay of, who's the best underwriter for their medical history on top of that. And that's the scenarios that I'm not looking forward to, where someone might be clearly the best from an underwriting outcome, but there's an exclusion or a clause that would be a significant detriment otherwise. So laying that out will be add an element of trickiness to it. Not insurmountable, but certainly not more time consuming.
So it sounds a little bit more like there's more work to be done from the advisor's point of view. The products might be simpler, but it hasn't really brought the cost down because the cost to provide the advice is going to go up.
Yes.
Katherine, thanks so much for being part of this particular episode. We look forward to catching you in the next one.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Welcome back, Jeff.
Thanks, Fraser.
Brilliant to have you along. Now, in this particular episode, we are talking about some of the mindset changes that really advisors need to take place. And of course, as you mentioned, you've got 24 staff and 7 advisors in your practice, all of which should be talking a lot about the new approach and how do you approach income protection at the moment. Tell us about your critical thinking. Has there been any major changes within the advisors' minds?
I think we're starting probably from I don't know if low base is the right word, but when it comes to insurance, it has been a challenging environment for a number of years. So advisors are starting with a little bit of frustration and a little bit of, some people thinking about throwing their hands in the air. And I know the statistics are suggesting a lot of people are walking away from insurance, which, from my viewpoint is a tragedy, because it's such an important part of what we do for our clients. It's such an important part of what we do for society, and it's going to lead to bigger problems down the track. So if there's less people providing advice in this space, then it is going to be, it's going to cause problems. So, I'm doing my best. I'm an optimist by nature. So, I don't find it too hard to kind of put a smile on my face most days. But doing my best to encourage our team to continue to look for those opportunities to help our clients in any way we can, and insurance being a big part of that. I think when it comes to the recent changes, I kind of separating into two camps. It's like for new clients who don't have existing cover, then the mindset is pretty straightforward. It's, this is what we've got to work with. We're going to do the best we possibly can for you with the tools and the products we've got available to us, and we just get on with it. Any challenges with that are really in the advisor's head. And that's where we can get caught up going, but the product is crap compared to what we used to have. And that might be true, but it's what we've got. So there's nothing we can do about that right now. So we've just got to get on with it and say, this is the best product. How can we help our client in the best way we can? For those existing clients, it is a harder one, because we do know that at some point in time, we're going to have to bite the bullet and make those changes potentially, because it's going to become unsustainable from their cash flow to keep those products. So that's a hard one to get through, and I think we need to, I guess, continue to work with our team on that one. But I think there's lots of stuff that I can think about in terms of advisors' mindset, where I think we talked about in an earlier episode a little bit of that disincentive for innovation and that first mover disadvantage. And that's because, we have become quite set in our ways and familiar with the products that we've got, and we like what we've got. And when somebody comes out with something which might be a little bit different, which might be a really great idea, but it's quite different, and there's, it's hard to compare, and it's hard to revise our kind of strategy for recommending it to clients and presenting it to clients, then there's resistance. So it doesn't get the support. And then so the insurance companies go, well, what's the point in innovating anymore? Because we don't, no one wants to listen. So that's a challenge. And in some ways, because APRA banging us on the head with these changes might actually be a good thing, because we've got no choice. We can't sit here and think about whether we should change or not. We've got to change.
Yeah, exactly right. When there is a massive amount of change like that, it really just has to be the mindset of we get to do something new now, not we've lost something that's gone. You touched on the concept of advisors walking away, which is going to be, I guess, an issue that we're kicking the can down the road a little bit. The reward for the risk, I suppose, of writing risk has become a lot less, and sort of needs to be, or might have to come back to the table as we get harder. Obviously, that was driven by sustainability and the concept of trying to make premiums or profits more sustainable. Talk to us about that concept of, a lot of advisors walking away, and how that might be a supply and demand issue in the future.
Yeah, I can really see both sides of this sort of conversation. I can really understand why advisors who've got a good business and they're providing, strategic advice and investment advice and retirement advice and cash flow and helping their clients in so many ways, why they do sort of screw their nose up or get a bit put off by the insurance conversation, because it can go wrong in so many ways, or it can become challenging in so many ways, because you've got the underwriting process which drags out. You've got, people being asked these invasive questions and, uncovering things that they don't really want to talk about. And then you've got delays, and then you've got the premium increases you've got to handle off the back of that when you've got it through. So, it's a hard area, and then it's becoming more complicated as well. So when you've got so much you've already got to know and understand and cover from a compliance viewpoint, it's totally understandable. And maybe the specialist model is the right way to go, but we've got to make sure we've got enough specialists to sort of cover that off. And I heard recently, and I don't have a source for this, I can't remember where I heard it, so don't quote this, that there's somewhere between 400 and 600 specialist insurance advisors in the market now, when there used to be somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000. So and when you put on top of that many generalists are choosing not to do insurance advice, or doing very little of it anymore, then that's a massive drop in the available market to service clients. And the need for this advice is as much, if not more, than ever before. So there's definitely a supply. I think the supply will come back on stream. I think there's the need for the advice. So I don't think that's necessarily diminished, but that's more the demand side. The demand's there, but the supply is, there's so few advisors who are really focusing on this space. And I know I've seen a few people who have, chosen to pivot their businesses in recent times and focus more on insurance, which I think is fantastic. So, yeah.
Yeah, I tend to see the same thing. I've seen the risk specialists really innovate and try and work out ways of efficiencies and doing those sorts of things. And I've also spoken to a lot of advisors that are now just referring that out. It is, though, as you said, a huge drop in numbers. Quoting the stat that you heard somewhere, but that's 90% reduction, right? In the amount of advisors providing advice in that space, and if anything, the demand is going up. So that I guess why I think that's something that we're kicking the can down the road. You mentioned earlier the old versus new conversation. If we, the new client only, there's no choice. It's the new product. And, as you mentioned, you can control what you can control, and you can't worry about what you can't. But with the old client, or the existing client, we should say, not old, that has a product in place and isn't a product that we feel or fear, and we don't know for sure is unsustainable, but we feel it's unsustainable based on, some economics what we're projecting forward. As people leave those books, we know that books tend to get more expensive as people opt out of them, and there's no new people coming in. Tell us about your experience that you might have had in the past around that, seeing that in action.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as I said, our philosophy is that we want to help clients stick with the existing policies as long as they can. But knowing, we do know when we're telling them each year this increase is large, but it's going to be large again and it's going to keep going up. But this is why we think you need to keep it. You still need the level of cover. It's still important to you in your overall plan. But also talking to them about when it might not be so important anymore. So let's look at your overall financial position and is that changing and can we kind of tweak the sums insured or have a plan to when we don't need the cover anymore? So that's one part of it. But interestingly, I'm having a chat with a friend the other day talking about other experiences with this type of thing. One of our old, he is old and wouldn't mind me calling him old, but I won't mention his name, old mentors who when we first started in the business was sort of head of one of the licensee that we were with, talked about his experience with when endowment policies started becoming out of favour. And, like you were saying, he was very much of the view that more people would drop out, the bigger the pool available for those who stay in. So he was determined to live to 100 and keep his policy going because he thought he was going to be the only one left in the pool. So, there is, I guess, a little bit of experience with that sort of change. And I don't think there's any real opportunity in this because there isn't a pool. But in terms of the opportunity is really the quality of the product and the likelihood of getting a good claims outcome, which is what they went into it for in the first place.
Yeah, now you mentioned the pool concept. I love this concept because obviously with the newer style of products after the endowment policies no longer became part of our vocabulary, is that the premium is the only real input into the pool and the pool gets used up every year based on the amount of premium coming in. This is this draws an interesting topic then, isn't it? Because if we're all in this together, the whole idea of insurance is to have a pool of people that all pitch in a bit of money and it goes to those who need it most that year. Then, if we overlay a best interest duty, you're there to provide the best in, what's in the best interest of that individual single client. Does that then pull against the concept of having a pool of people and we're working together as a team in the pool and then an individual client then getting financial advice tries to win, I guess, against their own pool? Yeah,
it's an interesting question and concept, but I guess it does to a degree. It's where, if we can hang in these quality products, knowing that the pool is decreasing and there's no new business going in, so we know that's going to mean the premiums go up even more because you're not getting any new entrants to it. But it's in the best interest of that client to, and I guess to a degree, we know that it's potentially impacting on the profitability of the insurance companies, which is a lesser concern, but it does impact sustainability long term. But you're right. Our first duty is to the best interest of our client, and if that's the best product for them, then that's what we've got to recommend. And I guess there's a degree of we don't have a great deal of confidence in the insurance companies to have gotten it right. So much so that we think it's going to be, definitely going to be a new sustainable product, and we want to kind of support that. If you know what I mean, it's kind of if we knew that they'd got it right and that it was going to be sustainable and this was the product of the future, then it'd be easier to jump. But the jury's out on that one.
It's one of those wait and see. You mentioned best product, which I think is a really important part of this with best interest, best product for you to claim on. Should you claim? I think that's the key. But also the best product for all of the other people in the pool to claim. So the better the product is for the individual, the actual worse the product is for the individual, because the better the product is for the pool to claim on it. And so there could be a critical thinking mindset shift concept here that says actually the easier it is to claim, the worse it is for you should you not be claiming.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. But the idea is that you have the policy in case you claim, and if you do need to claim, then you want to maximise the probability you're going to get the benefits that you need based on your strategy and what was put in place. And that's the big difference, isn't it, with the current insurance model versus the endowment style and that type of thing.
Not for us to solve in this particular podcast. But there you go, Jeff. Thanks so much for coming on and challenging a bit of the thinking that goes around this. I look forward to chatting to you when we catch up again in the episode where we'll be covering some of the insurance philosophy.
Fantastic. Thanks, Fraser.
Welcome back, Natalie.
Oh, hi, Fraser. It's great to be back.
Thank you for joining us. Now we are diving into some pretty heavy critical thinking in this particular episode, talking about some of the different mindsets and shifts that advisors have to sort of make or go through at this process. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about was the concept around a reasonable basis, I guess, of being able to talk about the replacement of, say, an existing product with a new style product, because I think that's one of the things advisors are really struggling with at the moment.
Oh, I have a lot of sympathy for advisors, who are sort of facing into this this new question with these new products. I mean, one of the first things I would say is that nobody expects an advisor's advice to be perfect. Not even ASIC, not even AFCA. Maybe your clients do, but from a regulatory perspective, it has to be advice that puts the client in a better position than before the advice, than when they started. So what the advisor really needs to do, and I know it's kind of obvious, and I know all good advisors know this, but they must find out what is in the best interests of the client, and that means working out what is their objectives, financial situation, and needs, making reasonable inquiries about their circumstances, and reasonable investigation of the old and the new products. So it's going to be really important to really understand these new products, and then making a recommendation that the advisor believes is reasonable based on those relevant circumstances. There are going to be compromises in advice, and in life there are always compromises. There are things to give up and things to gain, and really the advisor is aiming at presenting the best possible option and being really clear about what those compromises are.
So really going through with the client, and again, that communication piece comes in, the risks and trade-offs, and the understanding and capturing the client's understanding and the decision-making process.
That's right.
Now, best interest duty has always been an intriguing part of the conversation, because when I see best interest duty, obviously I think about the best interest of the individual client. But of course, when we're talking about risk or insurance, we're talking about a pool of clients, which is all of everyone else's advisors' clients or advised clients in the same pool. And then the concept for me of if one of those clients has a win because they've been given a recommendation to do something that's sort of better or whatever it might be for that individual client, it could be moving against the pool of the other clients or everyone else's advised clients. And the concept of best interest duty for an individual might actually move against the concept of the pool.
It's a really fascinating perspective, and I think in a global sense, insurance and the very nature of it, the idea of pooling risk, and benefiting everyone, benefiting those who both need it, but also benefiting everyone with the peace of mind that, if they do need it, they'll be able to access the support. That's the very sort of fundamental crux of life insurance, really, and all insurance. I would say, it's certainly an interesting perspective. I would be really clear, though, as an advisor, what the requirements are, in advising a client, and what those requirements say are, really personal to the client. What is that person's financial situation, circumstances, needs, what's most important to them, both in the short term and the long term. These are really long-term products still. And that might include, for example, special benefits or things that they particularly request, but it's also got to, I guess, harking back to, our earlier conversation, it's really got to also include what they can afford, and any consequences of the advice. So, any tax or, other consequences of that advice. So I would say, interesting concept overall, and something to keep in mind, but really what the requirements are saying is know your client, understand what they want, communicate really well with them about what you're recommending, and the positives and the negatives of that recommendation.
Yep, yep. Now and this comes back down to some of the mindset thinking that I hear this a lot, that people think of this as the client versus the insurance company in that respect, and then I also I like to try and think of it on the concept that it's actually the clients in the pool of all the other clients, and the insurance company is just the administrator of that pool, or the trustee of that pool, if you like, and that our products have been so good. Compared to the rest of the world, they've been this amazing product that has been far far better than any other country in the world had, and we had this incredible policy. But it's expensive to run that because it's easier to claim. It's not necessarily it's easier for the one client to claim, but it's also easier for all the other clients in the pool to claim as well, which makes it I guess a leaky sieve rather than a bucket.
A leaky sieve. I've actually heard that used before in this context, and but like you, and I can hear it when you talk about it. I'm very proud of our our superannuation system, including the group insurance that comes along with it, and our financial services industry, including insurance and life insurance generally. These have been products that really stepped up to meet particularly growing mental illness diagnoses and lots of other things. So I agree with you. I wouldn't like to lose the positive in all of that. I certainly, having been at insurers, at a couple of different insurers in my career, quite genuinely, it never felt like it was us against the claimants. I've run claims teams of 300 or 400 claim staff, really genuinely trying to process and pay claims where they were due, in my experience anyway. So I agree with you. I think it was just a very difficult situation, more broadly, which is that those products simply, were more generous than the premiums that were originally set could afford, and there was a correction that would have to come from that, and that was skyrocketing insurance premiums, and now, and I think to be fair to APRA, really, for many years, making comment around this and trying to seek change and intervention, and now coming out with something that is designed to sort of really put a stop on that cycle and make things more sustainable. I hope that answers your question in a very long way, Fraser.
It does. I want to ask you also about research software, because I think the concept of rating premium versus price, more lower price, more benefits, lower price, more benefits, has been a bit of a crutch that I think advisors have leant on for some time. How do you see that changing, or how do you see that crutch when it comes to, you mentioned other things like affordability and really making sure that's in the best interest? Do you see advisors now moving not just for that crutch of premium versus benefits, but also taking into a lot of other things into account when it comes to understanding or knowing the client, or understanding how different products might work, or how do you see this working?
I actually have a lot of faith in the advice community, that they are going to just rise to this new challenge, and I really not just look at, and hopefully they weren't already, but not just look at the product features and the extent of coverage, but also look at all of the other circumstances, including affordability, and make sure they're tailoring the suit to the client rather than throwing a blanket over them. And in the end, I think the outcome will be a good one for clients and for advisors, and for insurers and the general ecosystem of insurance, provided it is really well communicated what these changes are doing, both positive and negative, for that customer. What I hope doesn't happen is that there is a kind of a miss in expectations and reality between what's covered and not. But I feel like from the questions I've sort of been getting and the various presentations I've been asked to, I feel like that's very forefront in advisors' minds. And this this new challenge is just something that's going to cause probably a step up even further in the quality of advice.
Yep. I just want to go back a step and just try and get my head around this as well. The contemplatum of for advisors to contemplate replacing an existing product, an older style product, with a new product. At the moment, I think a lot of advisors just still struggling to get their head around that. Is that, I think, because to be fair, I think some of the fear around that is around the complaint, around the fact that it could have paid on the old one when it didn't pay on the new one. I think advisors are still struggling with that a little bit. Any thoughts or ideas on?
Well, I think I genuinely can understand, the concern around that, because there is a feeling that you want to give your client the very best cover that's available. But I've seen this phrase previously, and I apologise to whoever I'm ripping it off from, but I do think it was a good one. Best product does not equal best interest, and that is because what the regulations are saying is not find the most extensive product, but find out about your client first. First off, who is this person? What are their hopes, dreams, financial situation, needs, and then tailor a recommendation to them that takes into account those things, and very, very importantly, explains to them the options. And if there is an option for a product that doesn't cover as much, but it's really much more affordable into the future, especially, then that might well be the right thing to recommend. And I think that is actually what the requirements said anyway. I mean, that's what ASIC asks advisors to do.
I love that saying, best interest is not equal, sorry, best product is not equal to best interest. Fantastic saying. So does this mean that for an advisor who, talks to their client who's got preferences around, say, sustainability or not getting bill shock, and they become sort of a lead preference for a client, then you can certainly look at replacing replacing the old ones with new?
Oh, 100%. I think it's a really viable option. We've had a lot of complaints from people who they might have had the best product, but if they're not going to be able to afford it before a claim event happens and they're going to need to let that lapse, then that certainly wasn't a good recommendation.
Yep.
So absolutely, affordability is one of the things. It's not the only thing, but it's certainly one of the things that an advisor needs to take into account. The Corps Act talks about advisors' obligations in terms of switching advice, and that absolutely needs to include a lot of detail about the cost to the client, and as well as the benefits that the client may lose as a result of the switching. There's also the FASEA Code of Ethics that also talks about best interests and making sure your client understands the benefits, costs, and risks of the financial product that is being recommended, and certainly AFCA, in handling complaints, will overlay that entire situation with a fairness lens to see whether the advisor took into account the things that they could discover about the client at that time, and base their advice in good faith on what they were finding out.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about that fairness lens. How does it work practically? I know you've sort of got committees and groups and different people you go to.
Yeah, well, I mean, AFCA's really interesting because, we don't just apply the law when we consider complaints. And this sometimes makes people nervous, but actually I think, if you sort of get into the detail, it's actually, a really good thing. So we apply legal principles, absolutely. Also, industry codes and guidance, including the Code of Ethics. Then we look at also good industry practice and previous determinations that AFCA's made. So we try to be consistent. But we also have this, what is fair in all the circumstances. So an advisor who is genuinely trying to understand what their client needs and wants, and has tried to meet that in a recommendation, shouldn't be responsible for things that happened that they couldn't have foreseen, for example, or if the wrong information was provided to them. But what I would say is that we would expect, a good effort at communicating what the client was getting, the benefits and risks, and also I would strongly recommend good documentation so that we can look back sometimes several years prior and have a clear picture of what happened at the time.
Yep. Natalie, thanks so much for coming on this particular episode. We look forward to catching you in the next one.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Fraser.
Thank you for joining us again, Ben Martin.
Thank you, Fraser.
Now, in this particular episode, we are challenging some of the thinking that goes on for advisors inside their heads around what it is and their mind shift, their mindset for turning up each day and understanding what the new products are going to do and how to talk to their clients about it. Tell us a little bit about the mindset shift. Obviously, you speak to advisors every day. What are they struggling with, and what are the things you sort of say to them about the new world versus the old world?
Yeah, look, look, the reality is it's unsettled a lot of our advisors across the country. It's just another round of regulatory change that we need to digest and navigate. The advisors that we've been working with that seem to be making inroads in this space are somewhat buoyed, if I could be honest, Fraser, because fundamentally what they keep coming back to is, yes, we've got significant change on the horizon that we need to perhaps refine and finesse our advice process, particularly when it comes to income protection, retail advice. But they're somewhat buoyed because they know that whilst APRA had stepped in and imposed a whole bunch of measures, it's in the long-term interests of the industry, their practice, and ultimately their clients. And that's because if we get this right, we're going to end up with a range of IP products that are, and I hate to use the word fit for purpose, but that is code for IP contracts that are there to replace a portion of the client's income in a fair and meaningful way by reference to what they were deriving, by reference to the income that they were earning prior to the disablement. And then there are mechanisms built into this contract that ultimately encourage and help the client return to wellness and return to work, where we know and advisors understand that is in their best interests long term. Okay, so in some respects, yes, we've got lots of change on the horizons. It's overcomplicated advice and practice in the real world. But if we can get it right, there's an opportunity here for us to build products that are fit for purpose, that are cost effective, that are affordable, that are liberated from those traditional ad hoc rate rises. And that can be only a good thing because we remove that element of surprise for clients. We're able to set the right expectations from the outset, and ultimately, hopefully that's going to result in a reduction in lapses for our clients and ensure clients have cover and the contracts that they can lean on in times when they need it most.
Yeah, you mentioned fit for purpose, and whilst neither of us like using that term, it reminds me of that, the rest of the world has contracts that are a certain, a way more like our new contracts, and we just happen to have really, really good contracts here. So it feels like we're having something taken away, but essentially we're sort of just coming back into line with the rest of the world.
Yeah, and look, APRA pulled that out and alluded to the fact that we are a bit of an outlier when you compare our traditional IP product settings with comparable jurisdictions around the OECD. So I get that. And I think a lot of advisors understand that. And look, that was the primary reason why they put a line through agreed value income protection policies, as well as those bells and whistles that created those overly excessive income replacement ratios, because there was that fundamental disconnect between the insured benefit that's being paid out at claim time and the income that was being received in the lead up to the injury or illness that occurred.
Yeah. Now, earlier on, you mentioned step changes. Obviously, we've seen some steps previously, but we've still got some steps to go when it comes. Does that mean we've got more instability, or does that just mean we know what's coming? We just need to work out how to get our heads around it?
Yeah, look, I mean, step change in the sense, so my reference earlier to step change was the fact that APRA needed to step in and impose changes on the industry because unfortunately, when left to our own devices, we just weren't going to change on our own accord. And unfortunately, we got to a position where the regulator had to step in and impose these measures on insurers. Look, there's a couple of things also. Look, they didn't get it all right from the very beginning. I think it's worth calling out Fraser, although there was one particular measure there around the 5-year initial contract term for these next generation IP policies. That particular measure was meant to kick off from October this year, but due to a whole bunch of implementation issues that emerged during the consultation process, it was decided and settled that that particular measure would be deferred. The kickoff date for that would be deferred until this time next year to allow the industry a little bit more breathing space and scope to work out how it would be implemented in practice.
Yeah. Now, in the minds of many advisors, there's been a little bit of. I've spoken to some advisors that have said that they just outsource or refer risk off now. Is this the birthplace of the new risk specialist?
Look, so I hadn't actually ever thought about that. I have seen commentary on the topic. My starting point there, Fraser, is that if you look at the current settings, there's lots of variation. There's lots of variation in terms of the underlying terms and conditions and features of these new constructs. Now, if I'm an advisor and I'm providing a recommendation to a client to acquire a particular income protection contract, in this new world of variation, I need to be across what those different features are and how that fits in with my client's underlying needs, goals, and objectives. If I don't, then arguably I'm not meeting best interest duty. So in that regard, in my humble opinion, I think the role of the specialist risk advisor is much more important in this new world in comparison to our old settings where there was a lot of consistency and we didn't have as much variation within the traditional IP contracts.
Yeah. So in the past, it was just very easy to jump on a software rating and work out what was going to be the best, best interest based on product and pricing. But now it's much more important to have a human go through that.
Oh, most certainly. And I can give you an example. If you look at the requirements that must be met in the waiting period, for example, and you analyze the differences across the market, there's lots of variation. So, for example, some insurers require the claimant to be totally disabled for the entire waiting period. Others require the claimant to be totally disabled for only 1 day. Now, depending on the client's occupation and nature of gainful employment, aligning a particular contract with certain requirements within the waiting period is a key and important consideration. Going into that blindly without knowing that level of detail, which perhaps your non-risk advisor may not be across, is something that is fraught with danger, particularly from a best interest duty perspective.
Yep. Hey, Ben, thanks so much for coming on this particular episode. We really leant in towards the critical thinking and mind shift. We look forward to catching you in the next episode when we get stuck into an advisor's insurance philosophy.